The posting had been up for 11 days before Daniel Voss applied for it, and he would later wonder in the long and sleepless nights that followed whether the delay had been instinct trying to save him from something his conscious mind was too stubborn to recognize. The job was simple on paper: a 3-week residency at the Arkan Mountain Research Station, a climate monitoring outpost operated jointly by 2 universities whose names meant nothing to Daniel. Perched at roughly 2,400 meters elevation in a range of mountains that didn't appear in any of the hiking guides he owned. His role would be maintenance and basic data logging, keeping the equipment running and recording readings from a network of sensors spread across the surrounding terrain, while the permanent research team remained on an extended leave the posting didn't elaborate on. No specialized scientific background required, moderate physical fitness, comfort with extended periods of isolation. That last part was what sold him. Daniel had been looking for exactly that. He'd spent the previous 18 months burning through a divorce, a job loss, and a slow, grinding estrangement from most of the people he'd considered close. The kind of accumulated damage that doesn't announce itself all at once, but settles into a person, the way damp settles into old wood, slowly, thoroughly, until you press on it one day and find there's nothing solid left. He needed somewhere quiet, somewhere far from everything, somewhere that would give him a reason to get up in the morning that had nothing to do with anyone else's expectations. Arkan Station was all of those things, and for the first 4 days it was exactly what he'd needed. The station itself was smaller than he'd expected from the photographs in the briefing packet, a cluster of prefabricated modules connected by enclosed walkways, anchored to a shelf of flat rock with the kind of engineering that suggested it had been designed to survive conditions significantly worse than the clear, cold weather that greeted his arrival. Inside it was functional and sparse, but not uncomfortable. A small kitchen, a common area with a table and 4 chairs that felt like too many for one person, a narrow room with a bunk that he claimed immediately, and a dedicated monitoring room where 6 screens displayed a constant stream of atmospheric data from sensors. He spent his first afternoon learning to read. The previous team had left the place clean and orderly, which he appreciated. Supplies were stocked exactly as promised. The heating system worked without complaint. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter, signed with initials he couldn't make out, read simply, "Readings from Sensor 7 have been irregular. Log everything, but don't recalibrate without contacting base first." He found the contact information for base on the second page of the briefing packet, a satellite phone number and an email address. He tried both his first evening, as instructed, to confirm his arrival. Neither received a response until the following morning, when a brief email arrived from an address he didn't recognize, containing only the words, "Confirmed. Log everything." He told himself that was normal. Remote research operations ran on skeleton crews. Responses took time. He logged everything. On the 5th day, he found the previous team's journals. They were in a storage cabinet in the monitoring room, behind a stack of maintenance manuals and a box of spare sensor components. He'd been sorting through looking for a replacement cable. 3 spiral-bound notebooks, each labeled with a date range and a set of initials, stacked neatly like someone had placed them there, deliberately rather than forgotten them in the chaos of departure. He opened the most recent one first, because he was curious, and the days were long, and the satellite connection was too slow for anything that required real bandwidth. The handwriting inside was small and precise, the kind of penmanship that suggests someone who thinks carefully before committing anything to paper. The early entries were exactly what he expected. Weather observations, equipment readings, notes on maintenance tasks completed. The kind of dry procedural documentation that research stations accumulate by the ream. He skimmed through weeks of entries with mild interest, getting a sense of the rhythm of life at the station. What the previous team had struggled with, the heating system in Module 3, a recurring fault in one of the eastern sensors. What they'd found pleasurable, a particular angle of evening light on the western ridge, the silence after a snowfall, then roughly 2/3 through the notebook. The tone changed. It was gradual at first, subtle enough that Daniel almost missed it. The observations became slightly less precise, slightly more personal, less focused on data and more focused on the surrounding landscape, on the quality of sound at night, on a feeling that the writer struggled to name and returned to repeatedly across several entries, describing it as a sense of being at the edge of something without being able to see what was on the other side of it. One entry, dated about 3 weeks before the end of the journal, read, "The sound again tonight. I've been trying to record it, but whatever equipment I point at the northern slope picks up nothing. Mom says she hears it too, which is either reassuring or the opposite, depending on how I think about it." We contacted Base. Base said log everything. 2 entries later, I walked out to Sensor 7 today to check the housing. The readings have been irregular for weeks now, but when I got there, the equipment looked completely undisturbed. No ice damage, no moisture intrusion, nothing physically wrong that I could find. But the readings from that sensor specifically show a pattern I don't know how to explain in the log. The pattern looks almost like a pulse. Daniel set the journal down. He picked up his coffee, found it had gone cold, drank it anyway. Outside the monitoring room's single window, the western ridge was lit gold by afternoon light, clean and still and entirely ordinary. He looked at the screens displaying the current sensor data. 6 sensors, 6 steady streams of atmospheric readings, temperature and pressure and humidity, all within expected parameters. He looked at the label under the screen in the far left corner. Sensor 7. The readings from Sensor 7 were pulsing. Steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, like something breathing, like something alive and very large, taking slow, even breaths somewhere beneath the northern slope. He contacted Base. He described what he was seeing in the sensor data, careful and precise, the way the briefing packet had instructed him to be. He waited. Base responded 6 hours later. Log everything. Do not recalibrate. He went back to the journal that night because he couldn't sleep, and the alternative was lying in his bunk, listening to the sound. He was trying to convince himself he wasn't hearing from the direction of the northern slope. Low, rhythmic, below the threshold of what he could confidently call sound, and above the threshold of what he could confidently dismiss as imagination. The final entries of the journal were harder to read, not because the handwriting changed. It stayed small and precise until the last page, but because the writer's relationship to language seemed to shift in a way Daniel found difficult to describe. Sentences became longer, more recursive. doubling back on themselves mid-thought as if the writer was trying to hold on to a clear statement and kept finding it slipping. One entry near the end read, "There is something under the station. I don't mean this literally, or I don't mean it only literally. I mean that whatever the sensors are picking up on the northern slope is also somehow here, in the walls, in the sound the pipes make at night that isn't the pipes. M. said this morning that she feels like she's being read. The way a book is read, page by page, something large and patient turning her over and going through her carefully. And I told her that was just the isolation talking. But I didn't believe it when I said it, because I feel it too. Whatever is out there has been here longer than the station. Longer than the mountain, maybe. It doesn't move. It doesn't need to. It just waits and reads, and takes notes the way we take notes, except what it logs is us. The last entry in the journal was a single line, "We're going to leave tomorrow." We should have left a week ago. Log everything. Daniel put the journal down. He sat for a long time in the monitoring room, watching the Sensor 7 data pulse steadily across the screen, listening to the sound from the northern slope that wasn't quite a sound. He thought about leaving. He thought about it clearly and practically, running through the logistics. He had a vehicle, he had fuel. The road down the mountain was navigable in current conditions. There was nothing physically stopping him from packing his bag right now and driving away before morning. He didn't leave. He still isn't entirely sure why when he tries to reconstruct the decision later. The closest he can get to an explanation is that the feeling of being read, the one the journal's author had described so precisely, had already started by the time he finished the last entry, and leaving had begun to feel like something that would need to be approved first, by something he couldn't identify and couldn't contact and couldn't convince. He spent the next 3 days logging everything. Sensor 7's readings, the sound from the northern slope, his own sleep patterns, fractured, shallow, full of something that wasn't quite dreaming. The way the other 5 sensors began, slowly and then quickly, to show the same pulsing pattern as Sensor 7, one by one, each addition to the rhythm adding a slightly different frequency to the sound below, building towards something he couldn't name but could feel approaching the way you feel weather approaching, and the pressure behind your eyes, and the way sound carries differently before something large is about to change. He sent logs to base every 6 hours. Base responded once on the 2nd day. Continue logging. Do not attempt to locate source. On the morning of the 4th day, after finding the journals, Daniel woke up and went to the monitoring room and found all 6 screens showing the same reading. Not atmospheric data. A single number repeating, constant across all sensors simultaneously. A pressure reading so far outside the normal range for that altitude that his first instinct was equipment failure, total system malfunction, some cascade error he'd caused inadvertently. He checked the equipment. Nothing was malfunctioning. The sensors were functioning perfectly, returning accurate readings of something that simply should not have existed at that pressure, at that depth. In that rock dot he went outside for the first time in 4 days. The air was sharp and clear, the kind of cold that makes everything look very precise, every edge defined, every shadow exact. He walked to the northern edge of the station's rock shelf and stood, Looking out at the slope below Dot, the snow on the northern slope was undisturbed. No tracks, no melt patterns, no physical evidence of anything. But the surface of it looked wrong in a way he had trouble articulating even to himself. A subtle wrongness in the texture, in the way it caught light. Like something beneath it was very slightly warm, very slightly alive, and had been for a very long time. He went back inside. He'd packed one bag, the minimum he needed. He sent a final log to base, leaving today. All 6 sensors showing identical anomalous readings. Recommend full review before next team is sent. Base responded within minutes, faster than any previous response. Understood. Please leave all journals and logs at the station. Do not take any documentation with you. Daniel looked at that response for a long time. Then he picked up all 3 journals, put them in his bag, and drove down the mountain without sending another message. He's spoken to no one official about what he found at Arkin Station. He's tried twice to locate the 2 universities listed as operating the station, and found no record of either of them in any directory he can access. The satellite phone number from the briefing packet has been disconnected. The email address bounces. He still has the journals. He's read them through several times, looking for something he might have missed, some detail that would make the whole thing smaller and more explicable. He hasn't found it yet, and some nights, in the apartment 3 cities away where he's been living since he came down from the mountain, he wakes up to silence and lies still and listens carefully for the sound from the northern slope, the one that was almost below hearing, almost above dismissal. Some nights he doesn't hear it. Some nights he's not so sure.